drills, but the deployment is serious and the provocation much bigger than in the past. Does Xi Jinping have the appetite to go to war right now? And does the world have a strategy to respond if he does? Tonight we'll discuss this and show you the latest videos from Ground Zero. In Pakistan, a multi-front war to rescue the economy, including billions of dollars of West Asian investment. Can Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif pull it off? As the Gaza war drags on, companies linked to Israel face sanctions and boycott calls. We'll tell you which ones are making headlines. Is the world ready for a head transplant carried out by artificial intelligence? Why did a police jeep drive into a hospital ward in India's Uttarakhand? The video is unbelievable. What is biopiracy? What is the new law that challenges bogus Western patents of our centuries-old knowledge? Why are African countries turning to nuclear power? Why portraits have become controversial from Britain to Australia? They used to be a tool of propaganda, now they've become a pain point. And how is Gen Z changing the workplace from meetings to emails and everything in between? We'll discuss that, the headlines first. Setback for Israel at the top court of the United Nations. The court orders Israel to immediately halt its military operations in Rafah. The International Court of Justice also asks the Netanyahu government to open the Rafah border crossing for humanitarian aid. The ruling adds to mounting global pressure on Israel over its Rafah offensive. The Kremlin says preparations are on for Vladimir Putin's visit to North Korea. Last year, Kim Jong-un visited Russia. Both countries are facing Western sanctions. Pyongyang has been accused of supplying arms to Moscow to aid its war in Ukraine. Putin last visited North Korea in 2000. India to vote in the sixth phase of its general election tomorrow. 58 constituencies from 8 states and union territories to go to polls. All 7 of Delhi's Lok Sabha seats will vote in this phase. The 7th and final phase of voting will take place on June 1st. The results will be announced on June 4th. Singapore Airlines changes its seatbelt rules. Now meals will no longer be served when the seatbelt sign is on. The airline has also altered a flight path. The changes come just days after severe turbulence on one of its flights killed a passenger and injured several others. And Barcelona sacked their coach Xavi Hernandez. The ouster comes after the Catalan Giants failed to win a single trophy this season. But just weeks ago, Hernandez and the club's president had agreed that he would keep his job.
2024A 演习，岛链内联合打击药域战控能力。今天上午，东部战区发布多方向抵线台岛和环外岛战巡演练模拟动画，
全程开展突发情况迅疾处置，有效检验提升部队随行任务的能力，对台岛西南海域组织舰机联合反潜、药域战控等科目演练，与台岛以东海空兵目标单密切战术协同，对关键要道。
Did you see that? This video was released by CCTV, the official mouthpiece of the Chinese government. It's an animated video. It shows the bombing of Taiwan by the Chinese military. It shows missiles hitting targets like Taipei. And this video has been released with an ominous message.
We are able to achieve firepower precision strikes on combat targets anywhere and at any time, as long as the party's Central Committee, the Central Military Commission, and President Xi give an order. We will be ready to fight at any time.
That was a Chinese soldier outlining China's attack capabilities. He explained how the Chinese military can hit Taiwan with great accuracy. All they need is an order from Xi Jinping. And this message is for Taiwan and their new leader, their new president, Lai Ching-te. China calls him a separatist. He took oath of office on Monday. 2 days later, China launched these drills. In his inauguration speech, Lai had told China to stop threatening Taiwan, and in response, China chose to double down. They began what they're calling punishment drills. Today was the second day of this exercise. In the last 24 hours, China has sent at least 49 aircraft, 19 military vessels and 7 Coast Guard vessels. This is according to Taiwan. Reports say the PLA, the Chinese army, tested its ability to quote-unquote seize power in Taiwan. In fact, China is almost confirming it. Look at the statement that the Chinese military issued today. It says they tested the PLA's capability to quote-unquote occupy key areas. Occupy key areas in Taiwan. Simply put, China practiced how to invade Taiwan and take control by force.
Taiwan is China's Taiwan, and it is not the turn of the United States to say anything about it. The root cause of the tense situation in the Taiwan Strait lies in the attempts of the Democratic Progressive Party authorities to use the United States to seek independence.
China's tone is aggressive and the world has gotten used to it. Yet this time, it's more worrying because of the Chinese military's maneuvers around Taiwan. Let me show you a map. This is Taiwan. Look at how Chinese forces have surrounded the islands. They're conducting drills in every corner. Beijing has picked 5 target areas for this exercise, plus they've targeted at least 4 small islands. Now, these are close to Chinese shores, but these islands belong to Taiwan. The PLA has been conducting drills near them, and then they sent this message to Taipei.
Since taking office, the leader of the Taiwan region has seriously challenged the One China principle, nakedly peddled the two-nation theory, and attempted to use force to seek independence and rely on foreign countries to seek independence. This is purely playing with fire, and those who play with fire will surely get themselves burned.
So this was a comprehensive drill. They were not just meant to scare off Taiwan, they were supposed to demonstrate China's capability for a military takeover of Taiwan. And this is in line with Xi Jinping's orders. On multiple occasions, he has told his forces to be war ready. He says reunification with Taiwan is inevitable, and he doesn't rule out the use of force to achieve this goal. He has even locked horns with the United States over Taiwan. In April, Xi spoke with Joe Biden on the phone. And Xi Jinping told the American president that Taiwan is a red line and the US should not cross that red line. He wants America to stop sending military aid to Taiwan. So these drills were supposed to be a message to the US too. Again, a demonstration of China's military strength, which brings me back to the video we started with. It gives an insight into the minds of the Chinese military leaders, the military planners. It shows how they would go about invading Taiwan. This video identifies 4 potential targets: Taipei, Hualien, Taitung, and Kaohsiung. The video further shows Chinese jets being loaded with live ammunition, bombers conducting mock strikes, and mock missile launches. So the focus is on aerial attacks. And this will be a big part of Chinese military strategy against Taiwan, the aerial attacks. And their scope won't be limited to Taiwanese cities. Ships on the high seas are also vulnerable. In the past 2 days, Chinese planes have rehearsed this too. How to bomb foreign vessels in the Bashi Channel. This region falls between Taiwan and the Philippines, and the Chinese Coast Guard will have a role to play here. They too, the Coast Guard, were also part of the drills. They conducted mock inspections of civilian boats. How does Taiwan see all of this? They've called China's drills military intimidation.
Any use of threats of force to undermine regional peace across the Taiwan Strait will not help improve cross-strait relations. It will not only have an impact on regional security and peace stability, but will also have a negative impact on global peace and economic development. Therefore, we are not happy to see China's military intimidation.
So tensions are high around the Taiwan Strait. China's military activities pose a serious threat, not just for the regional players, but for everyone who relies on Taiwan's economy or sends ships through this region, which is pretty much the whole world. They should be worried about China's aggression. So you can hear the drumbeats of war, much like in Europe or West Asia. But the question is, will Xi Jinping give the order? Will he decide to invade Taiwan? It's always been his goal. Taiwan is unfinished business from China's civil war. Mao Zedong could not capture it, so Xi Jinping would love to do it. It would immortalize him and secure his legacy. So tonight we're looking at 3 questions here. 1, how difficult would an invasion of Taiwan be? 2, is China ready for it? And 3, what is the world's strategy? Let's start with the first question. An invasion would be extremely difficult. Taiwan is not some helpless island. They're armed to the teeth. Just look at the global firepower rankings. Taiwan ranks 24th. They are ahead of NATO allies like Sweden and Canada. And where does China rank? At number 3. But wars are not fought on tables. In the real world, China will face added challenges like geography and weather. They will have to land soldiers in Taiwan, and that means crossing this stretch of water, the Taiwan Strait. It's around 140 kilometers long. It's also very choppy waters, not ideal for an amphibious operation. But let's assume that China beats the elements. Taiwan will still be prepared. Their strategy is called porcupine defense. I'm talking about this animal, porcupine. It has sharp spikes all over its body and tail, so no one dares to attack it. Why? Because they know that the cost will be too high. And that is Taiwan's strategy. They have invested a lot in defense. Under the last president, defense spending increased by 5% every year. As a share of GDP, it's 2.5%. They spend 2.5% of their GDP on defense. We're talking about a variety of defensive weapons like anti-ship missiles, naval mines, landing spikes, and mobile missile launchers. But again, let's assume that China beats all of this. They land on Taiwan shores. Then once more, they would face geography. Taiwan has a lot of rugged mountains. They offer natural protection to the island's regime. And if you reach the cities, it's going to be urban warfare, like what you're seeing in Gaza. So long story short, it won't be easy. Taiwan has prepared and practiced to repel a Chinese invasion. Their way of life depends on it. So expect a tough and bloody fight if it comes to that. Which brings us to the second question. Is China ready for it? Does Xi Jinping have the appetite for war? US officials have made their own assessment. They think that Xi will wait until 2027. By then, he should have enough firepower. But could he strike earlier? And I ask this for a reason. China's growth is losing steam. Their GDP growth has largely stalled. It is expected to be 3.5% by the end of this decade. Same with their population. China's labor force will be shrinking in 2030 by almost 1%. So there are 2 ways of looking at it. One, it may force Xi Jinping to advance his invasion because he may think now is the time. If this window closes, it may never happen again. That's one way of looking at it. The second option, he may take the advice of Deng Xiaoping. Deng said, hide your strength, bide your time. Xi Jinping may tweak that advice. He may bide his time and rebuild his strength. The Chinese president is not known to be a maverick. So all bets are on delaying the attack. Plus, any invasion would trigger sanctions, and Beijing must prepare for that too. China has almost 1.4 billion people. You need to secure basic resources for them like food and power. Now, Beijing is already stockpiling food grains. Reports say they have rice and wheat for up to 2 years. But energy is a bit tricky. Most of China's fuel and gas comes from friendly nations like Russia and Saudi Arabia. But they're transported in shipping tankers that can be cut off. So China is working on a solution for that. Their Belt and Road project is trying to link West Asia via land. They're also building gas pipelines from Russia. So China needs to tick a lot of boxes here before they invade. They will get one chance at this. Which brings us to the final question. What is the world's strategy? The Americans are at the forefront of it. A US law requires the White House to support Taiwan, but it does not say how. Is it by deploying soldiers, or giving weapons, or simply offering political support? This lack of clarity is called strategic ambiguity. And Joe Biden has stirred this pot many times. He has said that the US will defend Taiwan. His plan is to build alliances. Let me pull up the map for you once again and show you the countries with US bases. You have the Philippines, you have Japan, South Korea, and Guam. There are thousands of US soldiers stationed in these bases, and not to mention lots of firepower. So if China invades, the US will be close by, either to intervene directly or to run support operations. And that's the military side of things. But frankly, the US alone won't be enough. We're talking about a very important region. Taiwan supplies 90% of the most advanced semiconductors to the world, 90%. The waters around it are also crucial. It carries around 21% of global trade. So trouble in Taiwan is trouble for the whole world, yet most countries don't seem bothered. We've seen a lot of activism for Palestine, but we haven't seen the same for Taiwan. They don't even have a seat at the United Nations organizations. The first priority is to change that, because China's biggest weapon is the One China policy, and most countries recognize Taiwan as part of China. The One China policy. So these countries may criticize the Chinese invasion, but how can they actively oppose it? Because their own policy is anti-Taiwan, and diluting this policy will be hard. Taiwan could use its chip superpower to woo other countries. It could set up factories or investments abroad. And frankly, that's the only way. For most countries, China is way more important than Taiwan. Until that changes, their policy will not. Let's turn to Pakistan now. Their Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was in the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. He made a bold declaration there. Sharif said Pakistan's days of begging are over. He says he's broken the begging bowl. Listen to this.
Gone are the days that I will go to a brotherly country with a begging bowl. I have broken that bowl.
Quite a bold thing to say, especially when your country is $130 billion in debt. So what's the catch here? If not begging, what is Pakistan's plan? Apparently investments. Shehbaz Sharif's UAE visit was quite a short one. He was in Iran for President Ibrahim Raisi's funeral, so he hopped across to the UAE for one day. He held talks with the UAE's President MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, MBZ, and afterwards he made a major announcement. Shehbaz Sharif said that the UAE will invest $10 billion in Pakistan, and that's a lot of money. Do we know where it will be invested? Well, there is no clarity on that part. Pakistan's statement said that investments will be made in multiple sectors, and the UAE is not alone. Saudi Arabia was the first to invest. Riyadh promised around $25 billion of investments in Pakistan, again in the form of investments, like I said, and their foreign minister traveled to Islamabad for this. A massive business delegation flew down, so the assumption was the deals would be signed soon. In fact, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was expected to visit Pakistan, but the trip has not happened yet. Meanwhile, Pakistan is also talking to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. They want another bailout from them. How much money this time? Between $6 and $8 billion, but apparently the fund is playing hardball. The IMF wants Pakistan to prescribe some bitter pills first. Like what? Increasing tax revenue, cutting expenditures like subsidies, hiking power and gas tariffs, and selling off state assets. Only then will the IMF approve the bailout. But Prime Minister Sharif is wary of this. These measures would drive up Pakistan's inflation. They would make matters worse for the common man, and Sharif's government is already unpopular. So will he risk this bitter pill? There's only one way to know: to wait until their budget is presented. But the IMF is not Pakistan's only lender. How can we forget China? They make up almost 30% of Pakistan's foreign debt, and Islamabad wants to restructure some of it. Around $15 billion of debt. They want it restructured. This money is owed to Chinese energy producers. They run power plants in Pakistan, but the government of Pakistan has not paid them. Now, Prime Minister Sharif wants to extend these loans by around 5 years. And if China agrees to it, Pakistan will save money on repayments, around $2 billion of it. At the same time, it could risk future Chinese investments. Because just put yourself in China's shoes. You give loans worth billions, you build infrastructure in Pakistan, but in the end, you don't get paid back. You're asked to extend or restructure that loan. Naturally, you will feel betrayed, but Pakistan does not have a choice here. They're hoping to strike a deal before the 4th of June. That's when Sharif will travel to China, his first trip to the country after taking office. So let's recap Pakistan's different moves. They're getting investments from the Gulf, asking for a bailout from IMF, and negotiating loans with China. It's a multi-front financial battle. Only investments will kickstart Pakistan's economy. Investments equal revenue, revenue equals loan repayment, and loan repayment equals debt, less debt. And that is broadly Shehbaz Sharif's plan. The question is, will it work? Well, Islamabad has put everything on fast track. State assets are being sold at record speed. Resources are being granted at record speed. And so are license approvals. It's basically a fire sale of resources and assets. So I guess Sharif's bold declaration was wrong. He hasn't broken the begging bowl. He has been forced to pledge everything, including the begging bowl. Vantage continues after a short break.
You are seeing the results today.
This is after the abrogation.
After the abrogation. Now, once you see that, Kashmir take off, the valley take off, the POK people are naturally making those comparisons. So, I put it to you logically that Kashmir itself is an issue where an enormous effort has been made over multiple years to lead this country down the wrong path because there were frankly votes to be had, or so people thought. There were, there was very narrow political interests involved. And as I said, who gained from what cozy arrangements? I think we are already beginning to see.
So let's talk a little bit more about some of these political games, and you have referred to this, and some of this is in the foreign policy domain. The Western media and some of the coverage of the Western media around our elections. Now, you were in Kolkata, I think, last week, and you said that countries which have to go to court for deciding election results are giving gyan on conducting polls. You also earlier said that some of these folks are trying to become active players in our elections. Now, my point is that if India is conducting this election, there are 90 plus crore voters who are voting. Some of these folks seem to have discounted that fact. What do you say to them? The sections of the press that you are saying is biased, whether it is the Guardian report which says, oh, Modi is constructing highways, but where are the jobs? Or the New York Times report which says, India's Muslims in Modi's India, and so on and so forth. What do you say to them? You have 90 crore people who are going out and exercising their franchise. There seems to be a disconnect between the two.
Well, two things. To them, I think the real answer would be given by those 90 crore people on the 4th of June. Okay, I'm waiting for that. Number two, the interim answer which I'm giving is, look, I know what you guys are doing, or what you guys are trying to do, what you think you can do. You think still that this is the old era where you set the tonality and the argumentation. Then your fellow travelers pick it up within the country. Then the public gets influenced by the way the narrative goes. Now guess what? It doesn't work like that anymore. Number one, yes, there are segments of my politics and segments of my media which are very attached to you, and you have a echo chamber arrangement out here. Recognize that. But a large part of my system today is thankfully autonomous of you, that it generates its own narratives, it has its own views, it pushes back on many of those things, and often what you think is my negative They actually think it's my positive. So you might try and skewer me somewhere. They are actually clapping their hands and say, oh, great job. So I think people out there are missing some things. Frankly, in many ways, I think they don't have an understanding of what are the changes in India. So I feel, in a way, we are seeing like a, I don't want to say last gasp, because there will be more, but certainly a kind of a flake.
Now let's discuss Israel's war in Gaza. The ICJ, or the International Court of Justice, has ordered them to immediately halt the Rafah offensive. Israel is unlikely to follow the order because it's not legally binding, but it further chips away at Israel's moral standing, or whatever was left of it. The prolonged conflict is hurting not just Israel, but all those who are associated with it, including players in the business world. Companies with links to Israel are facing intense scrutiny, even boycott calls. One of them is BlackRock, an American investment giant and the world's biggest asset manager. As of December last year, BlackRock was managing some $10 trillion in assets. So this company is both rich and powerful. Now they're pursuing a deal in Malaysia. It involves a firm called Malaysia Airport Holdings Berhad, or MAHB for short. Now MAHB is the biggest airport operator in Malaysia. The country has 40 airports. MAHB operates 39 of them, 39 out of 40. It is clearly a major player. And BlackRock is planning to buy this company. The deal is worth $2.6 billion. BlackRock is offering this money as part of a consortium. They want to buy this company, this Malaysian company, and control it. And this should have been a straightforward acquisition. But the deal has run into trouble. BlackRock is facing boycott calls. Malaysia's civil society groups have started a protest. 22 of these groups have written to the Malaysian government. They want to block BlackRock from buying the airport company. The reason? BlackRock's links with arms manufacturers, the ones that supply military goods to Israel. BlackRock owns stakes in multiple weapons companies, and one of them is Lockheed Martin. This is the company behind the F-35 fighter jet. Israel's military has these planes in its arsenal. BlackRock is a major investor in Lockheed Martin. In fact, its third biggest investor. It owns about 7% of the shares. Such holdings are now hurting BlackRock in Malaysia. It is being called a genocide enabler for its financing to weapons companies. And this campaign is gaining traction. This month, Kuala Lumpur hosted a defense exhibition. More than 1,300 companies participated from 60 different countries. US weapons makers were also present, including Lockheed Martin. They faced backlash from the locals. Protesters showed up at the venue with banners like these: "Murderous arms dealers, damned America, and we will fight." There were some messages for the Malaysian government too.
We urge Malaysian government to take a firm and consistent stand. Do not allow this arm dealer to be present and promote their warmongering ideology.
Accepting sponsorship from Lockheed Martin is despicable. It is blood money. It is profit made from the deaths of thousands, tens of thousands of innocent civilians.
Now, the campaign is picking pace. The protesters want to punish not just the weapon suppliers, but their financiers too. They're building pressure on Anwar Ibrahim, the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Throughout this war, he's been on the Palestinian side. He's been against Israel. Prime Minister Ibrahim has even tried to project Israel as a colonizer in Gaza.
I've said the whole issue is not what happened 2 weeks ago, but it's what we term as politics of dispossession. I mean, countries cannot continue to colonize another part of the Palestinian lands. But what is critical for now is, of course, peace.
That's been Ibrahim's position. But when it comes to taking on big business, it appears Prime Minister Ibrahim likes to be careful. His government has been accused of being unresponsive to these concerns. Earlier this month, Ibrahim spoke out about this deal. He did not name BlackRock, but he said a pro-Zionist company, those are the words he used, a pro-Zionist company will not own 25% of MAHB. So will the deal with BlackRock be blocked? The Prime Minister did not say it in so many words. Perhaps he does not want to push away a major investor like BlackRock. Though sooner or later he will have to take a clear stand, because Malaysia is a Muslim-majority country where anti-Israel sentiment runs deep. And BlackRock is not the first to face this challenge. Many Western companies have been at the receiving end, like McDonald's, one of the world's biggest fast food chains. It has faced boycott calls in Malaysia and Indonesia. Coffee chain Starbucks has seen a decline in business. Sales have slowed in West Asia. Their stores in the West have also seen protests, though Starbucks has denied taking sides in the conflict. Others like Coca-Cola, Pepsi and Puma have also faced boycott calls. And this may not end anytime soon, because the war shows no sign of ending. There's no way big business can avoid getting caught in the crossfire. Our next story is about a long-discussed medical concept, a head transplant. How does it work? Basically, you take the head of the living person and place it on the body of a brain-dead but healthy recipient. It sounds simple enough, but of course it isn't. Our bodies are not Lego. A head transplant would require complex surgeries involving our nervous system. And the scientific challenges aside, there's also the ethical question of body swapping. Nonetheless, a new company wants to explore this. It wants to use cutting-edge robotics and artificial intelligence to do head transplants. Will it work out? More importantly, are we as a society ready for this? Our next report tells you.
At first glance, it looks like a scene from a dystopian movie, maybe even some evil robot factory. Imagine this, a robotic surgeon hovering over a body, its octopus-like arms at work. It swiftly removes the head of a dying man and with the same speed puts it on a healthy body. If you think this is some video game, think again. This is BrainBridge. It's the world's first such concept for a head transplant. The aim is to use cutting-edge robotics and artificial intelligence. That way you can swap heads and ensure faster recoveries. So how will it work? The head will be placed on a brain-dead donor. That way it will maintain the memories, the cognitive abilities, and the consciousness of the transplanted individual. But it's not as easy as it looks in the video. It requires very sophisticated systems, ensuring a precise connection between the spinal cord, nerves, and blood vessels. Otherwise, it won't work. BrainBridge says the first procedure can happen in 8 years. But there are a few challenges. The first is our nervous system. Removing a brain requires cutting through 12 pairs of nerves. And it's not like a circuit. It doesn't just join back together. Nerves die when they are cut, so reconnecting them will be a task in itself. But imagine all of this does work out. The nerves are reconnected, the transplant works perfectly. The head is now on a new body. The question is, what happens after that? This is a process that's never been done, so there are many speculations. Will they gain consciousness? How will they react to the new body? Will the human be able to live in a new body? All of these are scientific challenges. And then there's the ethics of body swapping. Is it even right? Can you adapt to a different body? Preserving the patient's identity raises many questions, especially about the continuity of the self. Plus, how will they deal with such a profound alteration of the body? But ethics and challenges aside, it's a concept that's gaining popularity. Why? Because people think it's the best way to cheat death, to bypass age and diseases. From biohackers to techno-anarchists, everyone believes it's a concept worth exploring. BrainBridge's announcement represents a groundbreaking medical breakthrough. It has the potential to transform lives and the way we see medical science. As we stand on the brink of this medical marvel, one thing is clear: the future is now. But we can't embrace it without addressing scientific, ethical, and societal challenges. Those must be carefully navigated to make body swapping a success.
Many of you may have heard the saying, the long arm of the law will catch up. It means the cops will eventually get to you. Well, we don't know about the arm, but in this case, the wheelbase certainly did. Confused? Well, watch this video. Explanations are in order. That incident happened in the city of Rishikesh at the AIIMS hospital. Staff there complained about a male nurse. They accused him of harassing and molesting them. Soon an internal committee was formed. A police complaint was also filed. Meanwhile, the accused checked himself into the psychiatric ward. How original. You lose sanity the moment you were accused. Now, the staff was quite upset about this, so they decided to call the police again. That's when the sequence unfolded. The cops drove their vehicle up the hospital's ramp, climbed up to the 4th floor, reached the psych ward and arrested the accused. While going back, there was trouble. Apparently, some doctors were protesting the arrest. So the car took a different route through a busy emergency ward. Let me repeat. These cops drove a vehicle inside a hospital full of patients. We don't know the names of these officers, but I assume it was Jason Bourne, Rambo, and Ethan Hunt. If not, this makes no sense. We're not saying don't arrest the accused. By all means, arrest him, drag him out from the psych ward. But what was the point of this spectacle? Why jeopardize the lives of patients? Listen to what the police are saying, and I'm quoting. Since the staff was very angry because of the sequence of events, we needed a safe passage to take the accused out. So we used the emergency/VIP ramp to safely evacuate the patient cum accused. No patients were hurt or troubled because of this. Let me repeat the last line. No patients were troubled. I think the pictures tell a completely different story. You can clearly see patients being shoved aside, that too patients on stretchers. Also, what does safe passage mean? Was the accused holed up in the psych ward with explosives? If not, this was completely unnecessary. Our police officers are more than capable of dragging an accused out of a hospital. Which brings us back to the same question. Why did they do it? Well, because they could. Police high-handedness is not new in this country. Sometimes it happens on a small scale, like abusing or cussing during traffic stops, and sometimes it happens on a large scale, like fudging evidence or beating up suspects. It all boils down to the same thing, a culture of impunity, the feeling that you can get away with anything. Why else would you drive into a hospital building? And that feeling was right, by the way, because those officers have faced no action. Instead, they're being defended by their senior officers. Even the Supreme Court of India has addressed this issue in the past. In the month of March, they issued orders to all law enforcement authorities. And what did the order say? Follow the rules, uphold the statutory safeguards, and don't bring shame to the justice system. Now, that order related to a much more serious offense. Cops had cuffed and paraded a half-naked man. They also verbally abused him. So the Supreme Court took a zero-tolerance approach. But honestly, severity does not matter. What matters is the principle. When you put on a police uniform, you become an officer of the law. You don't become the law. Understanding this difference is very important. It applies to politicians too. How many times have we seen lawmakers slapping people in public or abusing civil servants or holding up traffic to have a breezy ride? All of this stems from the same attitude, that responsibility equals power. We need a massive overhaul to address this, whether it's during training programs or with attitude coaching or on-the-job learning. Public officials need to understand that they are here to help, not to intimidate or ride roughshod over us. Today, there was a historic announcement from the United Nations, from their World Intellectual Property Organization. After more than 20 years of negotiations, a new treaty has been signed. It will help protect the global south from biopiracy. For those of you who don't know, biopiracy is the stealing of indigenous knowledge, knowledge about genetic resources like medicinal plants, indigenous crops, or local animal breeds. For too long, Western individuals and companies have exploited this ancient knowledge. They see this traditional knowledge in action, and then they go home and patent it. Then they sit back and make profits of it, pretending to have discovered something that the global south discovered centuries ago. Well, starting today, that just became a lot harder. Here's our report.
The diplomatic conference meeting in plenary adopts the WIPO Treaty on Intellectual Property, Genetic Resources, and Associated Traditional Knowledge, and the agreed statements it contains, as contained in document GRATK/DC/7PROV. If I see no objection, and I see no objection, it is so decided.
And with that, a historic injustice is on the verge of being undone. The treaty that was adopted today may finally curb a menace to the global south. To understand biopiracy, let's look at a few examples. We'll start with turmeric. In 1995, 2 scientists at the University of Mississippi in the US were given a patent to use turmeric to treat flesh wounds. Turmeric is a plant that resembles ginger. It is indigenous to India and other parts of Asia. Indians have been using it to treat wounds for thousands of years. But scientists in the US were allowed to get a patent on this. This patent was soon challenged by an Indian research organization and revoked in 1997. But for 2 years, the US-based scientists were profiting off indigenous Indian knowledge. Another famous case related to India is of the neem plant. In 1994, an American multinational chemical corporation, W.R. Grace, patented the neem tree seed extract for an anti-fungus spray. Again, Indians have known about neem's fungicidal properties for millennia, but the American company had the audacity to try and charge royalties for ancient Indian knowledge. The patent was eventually overturned in 2000, but for 6 years, W.R. Grace was allowed to try and shake down Indian farmers. India isn't the only country to suffer from biopiracy. Another infamous case involves the Hoodia cactus. It's a plant found in southern Africa. It has hunger and thirst-quenching properties. A British firm and the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer tied up with a South African firm to produce an anti-obesity drug using the Hoodia, while giving no credit or royalties to the indigenous San people who had been using it for generations. This prompted the San people to demand compensation, and they managed to sign a benefit-sharing agreement. But often, the exploitation is never undone. South Asian basmati rice, South American quinoa, Mexican yellow beans, Ethiopian teff. There have been biopiracy attempts on all of these resources, and countless others. But it may finally stop now, because of today's new law.
So this is an historic moment. I was recalling as we were preparing for this, how many years we have been dedicated to the cause of a disclosure requirement on genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge.
After negotiating for over 20 years, all 193 UN members have agreed on the new law on patents involving genetic resources and associated with traditional knowledge. Anyone filing a patent for those will be required to disclose where they got the idea from. Credit will have to be given to indigenous communities where it's due, so patents will become harder to acquire, at least for things that indigenous communities have been doing forever. This won't be the end of biopiracy, but it's a crucial first step to bringing about its downfall.
Now let's turn our attention to Africa. First to Ghana in the west. Ghana is inviting bids to set up a nuclear power plant. It wants to boost its electricity production. And Ghana thinks nuclear energy is the way to go. It doesn't have any existing nuclear plants so far. Presently, in fact, only one country in all of Africa has nuclear energy, and that is South Africa. All other African nations rely only on conventional sources like fossil fuels or in some cases renewable energy. But Ghana has opted for the third path, nuclear energy. Right now, 5 countries are in the mix to become Ghana's nuclear partner: the US, France, Russia, China and South Korea. Firms from these 5 countries want to build Ghana's first nuclear power plant. It will be a long-term project expected to last a decade or more, and it won't be cheap. There will likely be loans and financing involved, which means there is potential for profit. How do we know all this? Because Ghana is not the first African nation to look at nuclear power. There has been a surge of interest in the technology lately, and one country has been reaping the benefits for a while now, and that is Russia. A Russian state-owned firm, Rosatom, has been forging partnerships across Africa. It began with Egypt. Back in 2017, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a deal with Egypt's Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to build the Daba nuclear power plant, the first nuclear plant in Egypt, and just the second in all of Africa. The deal is reportedly worth $30 billion. Construction began in the year 2022, and every few months, Rosatom gets more permissions to build more units at the site, expanding the plant's capacity. This makes it seem as though things are progressing well. And the Russian company comes across like a reliable partner, making it the partner of choice for African nations. South Africa wants to expand its nuclear capacity, and it is also leaning towards Russia as a partner. Burkina Faso and Mali, 2 coup-hit states in West Africa, also want Rosatom to build their first ever nuclear plants. Both nations signed memorandums of understanding, or MOUs, with the Russian company last year. Everywhere you look, Russia's nuclear firm is making inroads. And there are 2 things to note about this. One is, of course, that Russia has the first mover's advantage. The second point is that Africa is moving towards nuclear power. The question is why? Why are Ghana, Egypt, South Africa and the rest opting for nuclear energy? Because of the soaring demand. The population of Africa is booming. It's the world's fastest growing continent. Reports say that by 2050, 1 in 4 people on the planet will be African, 1 in 4. But the continent has not been able to keep up with its population explosion. About 600 million Africans currently lack access to electricity. 600 million, that's almost twice the population of the US. They don't have power. African governments need to move fast because young populations are a gift, a demographic dividend. They can be productive members of the workforce and fuel economic growth. But for that, they need access to the basics like electricity. Without electricity, productivity suffers. Businesses do not invest in your country, jobs are not created, and you end up wasting the demographic dividend. So African nations need electricity. They need efficient sources of power, and they need them fast. Fossil fuels are not as efficient as nuclear energy. They can generate far more power. You can generate rather far more power than from 1 kilogram of uranium than from coal. Renewable energy is also unreliable. A few foggy days will severely curtail solar power production. Nuclear power is the most efficient option for Africa at the moment. Of course, it comes with its own challenges. But at this point, Africa's countries, Ghana and the rest, are going down that road. Vantage continues after a short break.
Flailing effort by an old business which overvalues its influence and which honestly in this country has become increasingly irrelevant. They still have their friends. The friends are counting on them. I know that. That's why friends keep appealing to them and cite them. But it's not going to happen.
I want to come back to again one more foreign policy issue because again your party leaders, various leaders have been referring to this about claiming POK and that it will become part of India very soon if BJP is voted to power. Today I think the Prime Minister has given an interview where he has said कि मैं तो बिना वीजा के चला गया पाकिस्तान because एक ज़माने में तो हमारे देश का हिस्सा ही था. Is this some kind of an...
That's not quite what he said. He said, मैं Lahore गया whatever and he said, "Wahan koi TV interviewer keh raha tha."
Yeah.
So let's not put words in his mouth.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, is this some kind of an unfinished agenda for your government?
I think the POK is a long-standing that India's writ should run on POK, which is part of our country, is a long-standing position of the people and government of India and the Parliament of India. The problem is, like people have cheated on the constitution, like they have played games on so many other issues, they make it out as though, that doesn't exist and this is something which is a sort of angularity of the BJP. BJP is reflecting and articulating what is the sentiment of every right-thinking Indian citizen. Which one of us does not believe that POK is part of India? And if it is part of us, do we not have a obligation and a sentiment and thinking about it? It's natural. But the issue has come up because, see, nobody wanted to talk about POK because they didn't want to talk about Kashmir. They didn't want to talk about Kashmir because everybody had a cozy arrangement in Kashmir. That cozy arrangement was draining the exchequer here and bleeding Kashmir there. That was really what was happening. Now, once you got out of that cozy arrangement and in a sense integrated and normalized Kashmir, and you are seeing the results today.
This is after the abrogation.
After the abrogation. Now, once you see that Kashmir take off, the valley take off, the POK people are naturally making those comparisons. So, I put it to you logically that Kashmir itself is an issue where
The three most annoying words in the English language. Kids these days. Either you've said this phrase before or it has been thrown your way, but in all likelihood, both cases are true. Because this is only natural. People complain about those younger than them. It is a cycle of life. Researchers call it the kids these days effect. Creative, I know. Now, this effect is in full swing because Gen Z, or those born between 1997 and 2012, has entered the workforce. People say the young ask for too much but work too little. They don't respect hierarchies. They don't want to pay their dues, and they always have one foot out the door. Plus, they despise skinny jeans, which, let's face it, is half the millennial wardrobe. And this is not too far off. More members of Gen Z are entering the C-suite. Don't worry, the average age of the CEO is still 54, but the number of young CEOs is on the rise. And what's on their agenda? Few meetings, fewer email chains, and lots of emojis. This generation, you see, grew up with technology, so they're using it to make life simpler. Instead of holding meetings, they're sending voice notes. Instead of using words, they're using emojis and GIFs. Plus, Gen Z workers love flexibility. Some hate cabins or desks. Some don't want to show up to work. Some despise fixed working hours. A quarter of Gen Z say their productivity peaks at night. That's when they want to work. But less than 15% of the older generations log on after 6 p.m. So that's quite the conundrum. But Gen Z want workplaces to be more casual. The young are more open to talking about mental health. They want to discuss political opinions, and they despise formal email sign-offs. So they're saying goodbye to professional language. 41% workers say yours truly is dying, and 36% claim yours sincerely has been given a death sentence. And lukewarm regards are taking their place quite literally. It is no wonder that 3 in 4 managers find it difficult to work with Gen Z. Many complain of walking on eggshells, like they can't speak their mind, because one argument and their young employee is out the door. At least that's the impression. Because Gen Z is thinking differently about loyalty. For young workers, job hopping has lost its stigma. In fact, they are willing to change careers thrice. That's blasphemous to boomers, and it can hurt careers. Sure, work life is slowly changing, but some perceptions still persist. Repeatedly switching jobs is a red flag for traditional employers. So is informality. Many young workers want to be themselves, so they communicate casually or express political views non-stop, but this may not sit well with all companies. Workers still have professional responsibilities, there are certain expectations, and studies show that poor communication can stall career progress. Yes, some things are worth fighting for, but if every battle seems worthwhile, then you ought to rethink. I guess the smart approach is to be pragmatic, and this applies to older workers as well. Working with Gen Z poses its challenges, as it should, but they are the future of work. By next year, Gen Z will form a quarter of the global workforce. They will shape hiring, they will shape workplace trends, they will influence technology, public policy, clothes, food, all of it. In short, they will change how companies function. So ignoring the divide between the young and the old is not an option. It is time we rethink our perceptions and find a middle ground by balancing formality with approachability and tasks with relationships. It is not about changing who you are, it is about adapting. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In India, a helicopter makes an emergency landing after spinning out of control in Kedarnath. Sydney lights up with fireworks and installations as Australia's biggest festival of light returns. And the world's largest known living tree gets an annual health check amid climate threats. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 1964, more than 300 people died in the world's worst stadium disaster. It took place in a football match between Peru and Argentina. An unpopular decision by the referee sparked a riot. The police retaliated by firing tear gas. It led to a mass stampede, killing hundreds of people. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.
This is CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio.
You're with the hard facts from the CNN News 18 Federal Bank Primetime Studio. Viewers, skeletons are tumbling out of the closet. Let me be precise, the police closet in this case. It now turns out that the actions of the Pune police in the Porsche horror case have been less than credible, leading many to apprehend that justice may not be delivered to the two hapless victims who were mowed down by the murderous dereliction of the 17-year-old inebriated dissolute who thought driving daddy's big, fancy and super expensive sports car was going to make a more desirable man out of him. Yes, viewers, the young Agarwal, and I'm not going to call him a minor here, viewers. In America, at 16, you get your license to drive. And you have to be more responsible. It's forced upon you because a car at the end of the day, viewers, a speeding car, is no less than a missile, a weapon that can kill. And in this case, it did. 2 individuals. Because this dissolute could not draw a line between what is expected of him as an individual in our society and the temptations that he thought would make him more popular. Viewers, here's a list of the affronts by the police officers who allegedly might even have been seduced by the guiles of the spoilt and entitled protagonists' parents. Viewers, there are distinctly 3 villains here. At the apex, viewers, is this young man, not minor, man, and he should be treated by the law as an adult in this matter. He was only a few months short of his 18th birthday. That would have entitled him to even vote in this country. So at the apex, right on top, viewers, is this dissolute young man. On another side of this apex are his parents, and the third leg of the triangle, so to speak, of this pyramid. And in fact, it's an inverted pyramid of vanities, viewers, is the police. I would in fact believe that the police is actually the base, the strongest reinforcement of this pyramid. But viewers, unfortunately, the police has acted in a manner that would appear that it is incidental to this entire issue. But more about that later. First, some facts. There have been definitive lapses, and the man in the middle of your screens that you just saw is the Pune Police Commissioner, who has been under relentless pressure, has crawled out of the little carapace under which he was hiding for this last 1 week and admitted for the first time in public that certain things could have been handled better. Of course, viewers, he hasn't made a